Hi everyone, I'm really excited to share this latest tutorial with you and a new Photoshop action I want to share with you. So what we're going to be doing today is looking at ways to do a complete glamour makeover skin retouching that's going to take on even a painterly effect. But more importantly, I'm going to show you how to build a skin texture that's fairly automated and simple to do. So here's an image that the skin has some rough spots. And so it's going to be a real challenge to retouch even if we do the frequency separation technique on this because there's just a lot of work here. What we're going to do today is we're going to modify our frequency separation retouching method to a more simple version of it where we can actually build our own custom texture. If we just don't have enough good texture in the skin area to work with, we can build our own. So let's get started. So here's my action palette and it's in the button mode. So we're going to start out by going back out of button mode and we're going to create a new action set. And I'm going to call this skin retouching just because I want to keep the names a little clear on that. So this will be skin retouching and we're going to create a new action. And I'm going to call this skin texture retouching. And I'm going to change the color so it stands out a little bit. And I'll go ahead and use the orange color on this one. And the first thing I'm going to do is create a duplicate layer. And I'll just call this skin color. Now I'm going to insert a stop menu and say you are now going to adjust the Gaussian blur setting. So I'm going to put in a message here. You're going to adjust the Gaussian blur setting to smooth out skin. Be sure to use a setting that's high enough but where you can still see the circles in the iris of the eye. And I'll allow a continue on there. Next thing we'll do is we'll go to filter, blur, or actually next thing we'll do is we'll go to insert menu item and then we'll go to filter and blur, Gaussian blur. And then I'm going to hit the pause button here, or the stop button, and I'm actually going to apply a Gaussian blur. So I'm going to go ahead and, so here I'm going to just apply to where we just barely make out the circle, the kind of the outline of the eye right there. So that'll be our basic starting point. So now we'll hit the record button. And we're going to simply create a new layer and just call this skin texture layer. We'll go ahead and set this to fill it with 50% gray. And then we're going to go to filter, noise, add noise, and we're just going to add about 50, 51 in here. And we're going to go ahead and set this to uniform monochromatic. And then we're going to make this a smart layer. So we'll go to Smart Objects, Convert to Smart Object. And now what we're going to do is something really cool in that we're going to go ahead and apply a couple of filters, and the first filter we're going to apply is just a little bit of a blur. First thing we're going to apply is just a little bit of a blur, and we'll add a little Gaussian blur here. And I'm just going to look for just trying to make a little bit of skin pore feel out of it. So we'll just kind of put that in here. But the neat thing is we're just setting this up, and we can adjust it later on after we're done here. So that's the nice thing about using a smart layer or a smart object layer is that we can always go back and re-edit that filter. So we've added that filter, and now we're going to add another filter under Stylize, and we're going to use the Emboss filter, and we're going to make sure that the Emboss filter is happening at about the same angle as the light source in our original image. So the light was coming from the left, and this will be something that you'll go back and adjust after you use this action on other photos. So I'm going to go ahead, and I've been experimenting with some different heights here, but I'm going to go ahead and try a 3 pixel height on my Emboss filter. And now we can't really see anything at this point. So now what we're going to do is this, is we're going to hold down the control key, and we're going to say create a clipping path out of the layer below. And we're still not going to see anything. We're going to go ahead and change this to soft light. Okay, and now you'll see that we have the blurred image in here, and we're going to actually create our own mask for our skin texture. So I'm going to come in here to the skin layer, and I'm going to go in and apply a layer mask and hide all. Now this has got us back to our original image, and this is actually where we want to be for the beginning once we've run our script. So I'm actually going to hit the stop button real quick, and I'm going to show you what's magic about this. Is now this layer mask, this skin color layer, which has got the blurring on it, is now a mask for this texture in here. And if I paint with a white brush, I'll go ahead and set this to 100%. I can come in here and just smooth out that skin. I'll just come into all these areas here and just smooth it out. And what's really neat about this is now I can do all these areas if I want to, include smoothing out the skin on the arms, the hand. I can come in, and I'm just going to keep the sharp areas where the details are in the mouth and the eyes, but I can just come in here and smooth this out. Now, we haven't got everything out of there yet, but now we are at the point where we can use our knowledge of frequency separation retouching method, where we can now paint on this skin color layer. So I'm going to use my brush tool, and just like in frequency separation, I'm going to set the flow down to about 5%, and I'm going to select a color right near there. So now I can just kind of paint in this area and just smooth that area out, and yet we still have a little bit of a texture in there. And this is just like using the frequency retouching, where you see I'm just painting out that area right there. So even though I'm essentially painting a solid paint area, I'm actually able to keep some texture on there. Just going to clean up that line on the nose. Probably a little too far on that, so I'll just come back. So I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to select this whole forehead area where I'm having a lot of difficulty smoothing it out. And I'll just go in here and select, and I'm going to feather this a little bit, like 10 pixels. And then let's go ahead and blur it. Okay, see how that's totally fake in terms of this particular layer, but watch what happens as soon as I turn this layer back on right here. I've got my texture back. So the nice thing about this technique is that I can actually group my skin texture layers, group that, and now I can actually adjust Now I can actually adjust the overall opacity of that grouping to bring it back to where it's just a lot more realistic. But now I'm just going to go ahead and create a new layer, and I'm going to come in here and just quickly paint and smooth out any of these areas here. I was talking to a photographer just yesterday, was complaining about how it just looked too fake, but I think what we can do is we can bring back some of the real texture of the skin to a level that is very believable. And you have to decide, you and your client have to decide at what level of retouching do you want. And those for glamour retouching in Hollywood, they obviously do a tremendous amount of retouching where they make everybody look perfect. For me in my practice, I'm doing more of a fine art approach, and so I'm actually happy to do this painterly effect for my clients if they want that formal studio portrait that looks like a painting. This is a great way to be able to bring that in. And then I can just come in and just very quickly go through these areas here. And in fact, what I typically do is just create a new layer. Make it look ridiculous for a minute. Okay, and I'll now lower the opacity of that layer to bring back something that feels a little more realistic. Now, I could go further with this. You can go as far as you want on this. I'm going to go back to my paint layer right here because I feel like this is getting a little dark in here. So I'm going to select this tone right in there and just kind of smooth that out, blend that in. So we've left it at a point that I think is pretty good, very believable. There's before, there's after, and that did not take very long at all. All right, there we have it, and we now have a new action that will make this a whole lot easier. So let's experiment with another image. So here we are with a new image, and we're going to apply a little bit of our skin retouching technique with this. You can see that in this area, the cheek, I'll zoom in on here, that the skin's a little dappled in here. We could smooth that out a little bit. It's really nice and smooth over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to my button mode, and now I have this orange button on the bottom called Skin Texture Retouching. I will simply click on our action. It's going to remind me that I need to adjust the Gaussian blur, and because the resolution of this image is different than the previous one, it's going to need a different setting. In fact, I'm going to be pretty bold on this. I'm going to just really look for where that skin is smooth. Right about there looks pretty good to me. I'll hit OK. And so our action has done everything I've asked it to do. It's created our smart layer for the skin texture. And so now I can come in here and paint on this layer mask on the skin color layer and paint white to bring in this area. And here I'm going to set my flow up to 100%. And I can tell you right now that the embossing is way too much. This texture is way too much on here. And so what's going to be nice about this is I'm going to go ahead and not worry about it at the moment. It's going to be kind of gross looking for just a minute. Okay, so now it looks like she has a disease on here, and part of that is because the shadows are going the wrong direction. So I'm going to go to the Emboss filter, which remember is a smart filter, and I'm going to adjust the angle of the light to match the original angle. And I'm going to lower the height on this one. And that's pretty good right there. I can maybe go all the way down to 1. Yeah, 1 actually works pretty darn nice in there. Okay. Now I can see that I'm getting a little too much blur on that one. I really got the cheek quite nice on there. So I'm going to go back to my mask here, and I'm going to just paint in black over this area just to bring that eye back in there. And I'll go back to painting white in the areas down here that I want to smooth out. Getting really bold in here to see whether or not that neckline can just be smoothed out a little bit. That's looking pretty good. I might just come down the neck a little bit further to blend that in. Come into this corner of the eye right there. I'll just kind of smooth this area in here. Just cleaning all this up right in there. And now I can say, well, maybe I went just a little too far right down here. The neat thing about layer mask is I can paint with black at a different opacity, and I can just bring back a little, bring that area back in there. So now I'm going to go ahead and group these two layers together. And there's before, there's after. Look how fast that was. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and I can see another area that I want to do just real quick, right in this shadow area of the hair. I'm going to come back in here, and I'm probably going to experiment with like 50% and just kind of smooth that out a little bit. And that's doing a really nice job. And now let's take a look at her before and after. And I think that did a lovely, lovely piece of work for us. Maybe back it up a little bit, before, after. And now if I think that's too glamoury for this particular image, remember I can click on my group and just lower the opacity a little bit just to bring back if I want just a little bit more realism in here. So I can adjust how far I go with that retouching. And I think I'm pretty happy with that right about there. So there we have it, before, after, and it was incredibly fast. I'm so excited about this new action we've created today, and I will post this so you can download it and use it too. Thank you so much. We'll see you again soon.